Okay, so wisdom tooth removal. A lot of us have been there, right? But what you might think of as just a routine procedure is actually an incredible masterclass in surgical planning and precision. We're going to deconstruct that surgeon's blueprint.
So what does it really take? I mean, we're not just talking about yanking a tooth out with some pliers. No way. This is a carefully, and I mean carefully, choreographed operation. It's got distinct stages, and every single one is crucial for a good outcome.
All right, so the first thing to know is that the success of the whole operation, it starts way before the surgeon even picks up a tool. It's all about setting the stage, creating this perfectly controlled, totally sterile environment.
And just look at this ritual. I mean, it is meticulous. The patient's chair, it's not just leaned back. It's adjusted so the mandible, the lower jaw, is perfectly parallel to the floor. Why? For the best possible view. The instruments are laid out not just randomly, but in the exact order of use. Every single step here is about maximizing safety and being as efficient as possible.
Okay, the stage is set. Everything's sterile. Now, how do you actually get to that tooth? Well, this isn't a demolition job. It's not about brute force. It's about creating a delicate little window through the gum. And that means the surgeon has to make a really critical decision right from the get-go.
And that first step is creating something called a mucoperiosteal flap. It's a fancy term, but basically it means the surgeon is gently lifting the gum tissue to expose the bone underneath. But here's the thing, this isn't just some simple cut. The design of this flap is absolutely critical, both for getting a good view during surgery and, just as importantly, for making sure it heals up properly later. And this is where that first big decision comes in. It's really a tale of two incisions. You've got the envelope flap. That's just one cut along the gum line. It heals faster, fewer complications, great for teeth that aren't too deeply stuck. But if that tooth is really buried in there, you need more room to work. That's when you go for the triangular flap. It adds a vertical cut, a release incision that gives way more access. It's the classic surgeon's dilemma, right? You're trading off faster healing for better visibility to get the job done right.
All right, so the flap is pulled back, and now the surgeon can see the bone. But the tooth? It's still trapped, held hostage by the jawbone itself. So the next big challenge is clearing a path, removing just enough of that bone to finally set the tooth free.
So how do they do that? You might be picturing a hammer and chisel, but those days are long gone. Today, it's all about a specialized high-speed drill. And as it's working, there's a constant stream of water irrigating the area. Now, that's not just to keep things clean. It's absolutely crucial. It keeps the drill from getting too hot, because heat can literally kill the bone cells and cause some serious healing problems down the line.
And they don't just shave off the whole top layer of bone. That would be too much. Instead, there's this really clever technique called the guttering method. Think of it like this. They drill a deep, narrow channel, like a little trough, right alongside the tooth. What this does is create just enough space to get an instrument in there and pop the tooth out, all while leaving most of the bone intact. It's all about preserving the strength of the jaw.
And this quote from a surgical textbook, man, it really drives the point home. It says to keep bone removal to a minimum to avoid weakening the mandible, the jawbone, and causing a fracture. The surgeon is basically walking a tightrope here. You have to take enough bone to get access, but take just a little too much and you could seriously compromise the entire jaw. It's an incredible balancing act.
So, the path is cleared. You'd think the tooth could just pop out now, right? Well, not always. A lot of the time, the tooth itself is the problem. It's angled funny or the roots are curved. It just won't come out in one piece. So the surgeon has to switch gears and become a puzzle solver, figuring out how to section this tooth for a much safer, easier removal.
And the big question is, why not just pull harder, right? Just give it a good yank. Well, that's a terrible idea. Applying that much force is super dangerous. You could literally fracture the patient's jaw, or you could damage the tooth right next to it. So a much smarter, more controlled approach is to break the tooth up into smaller, more manageable pieces.
And there's a real art to how they do this. The surgeon will use the drill to cut about 3/4 of the way through the tooth. But for that very last little bit, the final split, they put the drill down and switch to a hand instrument. Now, why would they do that? It's all about protecting a really important nerve, the lingual nerve, that runs right there. Taking a high-speed drill that close is just too risky. That final gentle split with a hand tool, that's all about patient safety. Okay, so let's look at a couple of case studies to see how this all comes together. We'll start with the most common kind of impacted wisdom tooth, the mesioangular impaction.
That just means the tooth is tilted forward, kind of leaning against the molar in front of it.
The strategy for this one is actually really elegant. Once the tooth is exposed, instead of trying to wrestle the whole thing out, the surgeon just sections off the back half of the crown and takes that little piece out first. And just like that, by removing that one small part, they've created an escape route. The rest of the tooth can now be gently elevated forward and out of the socket. No more getting stuck on the tooth in front of it. Brilliant.
All right, now for a real challenge, the horizontal impaction. This is when the tooth is lying completely sideways, like it just gave up and took a nap. And it's usually wedged tight right underneath the tooth in front of it. This one's a whole different ballgame.
So yeah, the strategy has to be totally different. Here, the whole game is about creating space where there is none. After they get the tooth exposed, the surgeon will basically, well, they decapitate it. They cut the crown completely off from the roots. And once that crown is out, the empty space it used to occupy becomes the key. The roots can then be nudged forward into that new empty spot and then lifted out. It's a really smart solution to a really tough puzzle.
So, the tooth is finally out. Phew, but wait, we're not done yet. The job is far from over. In fact, this last part, the cleanup and closing up, is just as critical as everything else. This is what ensures a smooth recovery and prevents nasty complications.
And we're not talking about a quick rinse and spit here. This is a meticulous cleanup process called debridement. The surgeon is in there cleaning out the socket, smoothing any sharp little edges of bone, and making sure to remove any leftover tissue, because if you leave that behind, it can cause cysts later on. And then they irrigate, flushing the whole area with saline. And the research is crystal clear on this. The more thoroughly you irrigate, the lower your chances of getting a really painful complication like a dry socket.
And finally, closing up, you might think they'd want to stitch it up super tight, create an airtight seal, right? Nope. The sutures are actually placed just loosely enough to hold the flap back in place. If you pull them too tight, you can trap fluid and pressure under there, which just leads to more pain and swelling. The whole idea is to gently encourage the body to heal, not to force it.
You know, it really makes you think. A so-called routine procedure is rarely simple, is it? It just goes to show you that behind so many of these common operations, there's this incredible, detailed blueprint. It's a plan built on science, years of skill, and a kind of problem-solving that's just fascinating. So, what other common operations do you think are hiding this level of detailed planning?